terrorists entered a sovereign country and brutally murdered, mutilated, attacked, killed by hand. I've seen the video footage, the rapes, the murders.
There is no evidence, no credible evidence of any mass rapes.
The rapes have been proven. Even the UN admitted that there was sexual violence on that day.
By that standard, it is absolutely crystal clear that Israel is a terrorist entity.
I have seen arms, bombs, and I've seen this evidence with my own eyes, stored in hospitals and schools.
So you're telling me 50,000 to 800 and the Palestinians are terrorists and Israel isn't? Like, what drug are you smoking?
Why does every synagogue now have to employ police officers and security? I walk into my synagogue, Dimitri, I got to go through 2 security checks.
There's no evidence of systemic racism against Jews. Zero.
The 2 synagogues that were shot in Toronto were the only 2 synagogues along that corridor that were on that list. They were shot at because they were on the GTA to IDF list.
Who the hell cares what socioeconomic background a group comes from? If someone is being unjustly persecuted, does it matter how rich they are?
That's a perfectly fair question. What kind of Jew are you? You should be asking yourself that question, Matthew.
If you are targeting Jews in Canada because of what a government does, that is anti-Semitic. You are targeting a Jew.
I'm a Jew. I'm a Jew, and it hits close to home. Today we have Matthew Taub and Dimitri Lascaris in the house. Matthew Taub has been a recovery fitness coach for over 20 years. He was born and raised in Toronto, Canada. Matt, as he is known, is the founder of Unapologetically Jewish. Its mission statement from their website states, "We empower Jews to stand proud, speak boldly, and live safely, unapologetically Jewish, combats anti-Semitism through grassroots organizing, legal advocacy, and direct action building in a Canada where Jewish identity is celebrated and not silenced." Matt became one of the most visible grassroots advocates for Jewish Canadians after October 7th, 2023. He has confronted the Toronto Police Board, filed the complaint that got a protester convicted of a hate crime, and brought human rights complaints against officials in Toronto and Montreal. Dimitri Lascaris, if I got that right, is a lawyer, journalist, and a pro-Palestinian and anti-war activist. Not sure how the two coexist, but we'll find out. The publication Canadian Lawyer has him at number 4 of the top 25 lawyers in Canada in 2012 for his class action litigation and a fierce legal advocate for shareholder legal rights. He walked away from all that about 10 years ago. In 2017, he joined the Board of Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East, a pro-BDS anti-Israel advocacy group, and he was its chair of the board in 2018. He authored the BDS resolution that the Green Party adopted in 2016, and he ran for the Green leadership in 2020 on an eco-socialist platform. He has spent the past decade as one of this country's most prominent critics of Israel. This past March, he spent 11 days reporting from inside Iran, and I believe he was in Tehran just this month as part of a foreign media tour to cover the state funeral of Khomeini, who was taken out in the initial joint USA-Israeli strike on that country a few months back. These are 2 Canadians, one who is very much pro-Israel and the other who is vocally very much anti-Israel. My commitment today is to have an open and balanced conversation. The Unfiltered View is about seeking the truth. Who makes the stronger argument in this episode? Taub versus Lascaris? You tell me. We are an independent media, and your engagement is our currency. Please like, subscribe to the channel, and please comment. I read every comment. I'm Israel Ellis, and this is the Unfiltered View. And with all that being said, let's get right to it. Welcome, guys. Appreciate you coming on the show. Matt.
Thank you very much,
Dimitri.
Israel.
Just a little bit of ground rules over here. We are here to seek the truth as best as we can. We have a lot to cover today. Let's keep our points clear and short. Let's try to respect each other's views. I know it's a highly polarized subject, but that's what we're all about. Please try not to talk over each other if you can avoid that, but I understand how that can get out of hand. And please agree that I am the referee here. And that means that I'll do my best with that. But if I need to come in and ask you to, hey, let's stop for a second, please do that. It is said that the truth will set you free. Perhaps these days, the truth can set us all free. But what is truth? Dimitri, what is truth to you?
Truth is evidence. Truth is what my eyes and my ears and my other sensory capabilities tell me is actually the reality in the world, and extrapolating using principles of logic from that evidence. That's ultimately how you arrive at truth. And the problem with our discussions about Israel in Western society is that they are radically divorced from the evidence, even the evidence that is staring us in the face every single day, that is at our fingertips. Somehow, some way, those who favor Israel have managed to maintain a discussion about Israel's crimes that is almost entirely divorced from the evidence. That's truth for me.
Thank you. Thank you. Matthew, what about you? What does truth mean to you?
Well, I'm going to start off by agreeing with the first half of what Dimitri. Truth is following the evidence. It's wherever it leads you. Truth is separating, however, fact from fiction and making sure that it's not just looking for the truth with emotion. It's looking through fact-based evidence. So there's always context to everything. There's always two sides to a story, which then becomes a third side in the middle. It's looking at it from every angle, getting all the evidence and putting it together, where there's going to be people wrong at all times. We just have to find the truth in the middle of that through evidence, through your eyes, like Dimitri said, not just through your heart, though. We have to find out and separate the heart from the truth. It's all got to be from the head.
Well, I got to tell you that I disagree with both of you in one very profound way. I mean, truth is absolute. It is what it is. And while we'd like to say it's subjective, I think the subjectivity of the interpretation of truth comes from how we portray truth. And how we portray truth is often a result of the influence on the people who are portraying that truth. Let's talk about media and the truth. Would you agree that the same meaning of a word, however different, can change the context and impression of truth? And let me give you an example before we debate this or talk about this. Let's talk about CBC for a second. This is the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, which is taxpayer funded here in Canada. All journalists received an email following October 7th, 2023, telling them not to refer to Hamas as terrorists, but instead use the label militants. And though Hamas is considered and labeled as a terrorist organization, Catherine Tate, then CBC president, was later called before the Commons Heritage Committee, and she defended the policy. I think there is a big difference between being a militant and a terrorist. Do you believe this is an example of where the truth is twisted?
Would you like one of us in particular to answer first?
Anyone. When I throw a question like that, it's whoever gets first to the base wins.
Okay, well, since I opened my mouth first, I'll continue. You said that Hamas is considered a terrorist. That is actually not the truth. Hamas, in most parts of the world, is not designated as a terrorist organization. The Western countries, and not all Western countries, by the way, I believe one or two Scandinavian countries have not gone down this path. But it is overwhelmingly Western countries that constitute a minority of the human population who have designated Hamas as a terrorist organization.
Hamas is considered a terrorist organization in Canada. Is that
So?
correct?
So
Well,
does
I'm just
Canada,
asking.
does the Canadian government have a monopoly on the truth?
Well, we're just
Is it
talking about the CBC here. We're talking about the CBC.
Yeah,
We're
but the
talking about the official.
I don't believe that the CBC is obliged to take dictates from the government in terms of the terminology it employs. It's supposed to be independent of the government. It should be making its own judgments. And if it's acting rationally, it'll say, well, this is a highly contentious issue because most countries in the world do not designate Hamas as a terrorist organization. And I do want to say one other thing. It's very important. Excuse me. If we are going to call Hamas a terrorist organization, then we should apply the reasoning underlying that designation to all actors, including Israel and the United States. The standard definition of terrorism in the West is targeting civilians or civilian infrastructure with violence for a political, ideological, or religious purpose. By that standard, it is absolutely crystal clear that Israel is a terrorist entity. Israel does this every day. So that is another problem with the argument that the CBC should be calling Hamas a terrorist organization. Does that mean it is also then going to say that Israel is a terrorist entity? Of course not. I mean, Israel never has
Dimitri,
to face
I want to just clarify before I give it over to Matt. I want to tell you something. Clarify that it's the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, the European Union, Israel, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand, just to name a few. And
No. That's pretty much it. You said just to name a few.
Hold on.
That's pretty much it.
I think they're pretty. I think that they make up a very powerful part of the world. They designate Hamas as a terrorist organization, and we're not going to get into this just now because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to clarify how truth can be manipulated, and I think truth can be manipulated when you change words. When you take a terrorist organization, an organization that is deemed to be a terrorist organization by Canada and CBC, which is a taxpayer-funded media organization, should be, in my opinion, pulling its weight in terms of what the national, what is the recognized terminology on how Hamas is depicted, and whether or not we can disagree on that. But the fact is that there's a big difference between labeling a terrorist organization. We can debate whether or not they are a terrorist organization, label them as a militant organization. I think there's a big difference there. Matt, what do you think?
Well, yeah. So let's talk about the whole terrorist and militant aspect first of it. A militant group, is a broader part of the puzzle and a broader spectrum of the community at large. So it could be anybody who's uprising, not violently, right? Terrorism is a different designation. So when you look at designating an army from the West as a terrorist entity, attacking, infrastructure and attacking civilian infrastructure. We also know that in war, things do go awry. Nobody's intentionally attacking infrastructure that is trying to harm the civilians, right? If you look at the Russian-Ukraine war, Russia is intentionally taking out areas in Ukraine to stop the movement of humanitarian aid through the trains, through the roads. Would Russia be considered a terrorist organization based on that thought process? So designating the terrorist or the militant, it does change how people perceive it, right? This is not a ragtag group of people, right? The terrorist organization that we're portraying as Hamas is not coming across, as they really are. They are developed. They have high-tech weapons. They're not putting together, slingshots and mud and straw, right? So they are a terrorist organization. And when you turn around and the CBC being the one who is broadcasting that with taxpayer money, saying, do not call them terrorists, they are militants, it changes how they're seen. And then that becomes more of that oppressed versus oppressor version, which is what that, whole process we're dealing with right now between the West and everybody else, where it's not oppressed and oppressor, and that changes it. So when you change the wording through CBC, it changes how people are going to look at it. They're just making handmade rockets, right? It changes it, and that's where people get confused, and it changes how people look at what's happening.
Well, I think that the media, and whether it be our national broadcaster, whether it be newspapers or individuals on social media posts, they shape the way that most people see the story of what is happening, specifically in this case, what is happening in Gaza, what is happening, the story, the narrative behind the Palestinians. And that false media tends to create the truth. And Dimitri, you talk about truth in the sense that truth to you is what you see with your own eyes. However, what you see with your own eyes, if you're not on the ground right there or seeing things happening, what you are doing is you are seeing what has been interpreted and fed to you, which may not in fact be truth. It can be, and it very much is going to be influenced by some kind of popular or some kind of different view that creates truth.
Well, let's also remember, media nowadays is opinion. The mainstream media is opinion, and I mean, Dimitri, you'll say yourself, you're not mainstream media. You go and you cover it because you say you're a journalist. You cover it from your perspective and you're showing what you see. The media that we see on TV is not showing, they're showing the perspective they want you to get, right? You're doing the same thing. I'm doing the same thing. We all tell people the story we want them to see, and it's trying to come to the truth in the middle. We can't just look at one source. If you're watching Dimitri, you should be watching other sources to kind of come to the middle. And really, I think you'll agree with this, Dimitri. You can't believe just one take. You can't believe just one person and one news outlet. You should be looking across the board.
Well, I am in a privileged position to be able to go to these crime scenes and see with my own eyes what is happening there. I've been to South Lebanon 6 times.
Have you been to Gaza?
Yes, I'll get to that in a moment. I've been to South Lebanon 6 times since October 7th, 2023, always within eyeshot of the border of Israel and Lebanon. I have seen with my own eyes villages completely razed to the ground, villages that contain thousands of civilians before October 7th. I have seen with my own eyes mosques that Israel has leveled to the ground. I've seen hospitals in South Lebanon that Israel has rendered inoperable. I've seen ambulances blown to smithereens. I've seen these things with my own eyes. I'm not relying upon some third party to communiate these images to me. When it comes to Israel, I have also I went to the West Bank during Ramadan in 2024. So that was about 6 or 7 months after this genocide began. I went into the refugee camps of Tulkarm and Jenin, and I spoke to people whose families had been brutalized, whose homes had been severely damaged. I saw what was being done to the civilian infrastructure, the water pipes, the sewage pipes, the roads. And then I went to Gaza. I was not able to get in. I tried quite hard to get in, but I was able to stand on a hillside outside the Israeli settlement of Sderot that had a clear view of northern Gaza. And I spent an entire day there filming, and I didn't edit anything. Whatever I filmed that day, I published. And I saw how Israel was leveling to the ground the entirety of Gaza, and we've all seen the images there. I interviewed a doctor yesterday from Doctors Against Genocide, said that every single hospital in Gaza has either been destroyed or severely damaged. Every single one. So I've seen these things with my own eyes, and no one's going to be able to pull the wool over them. Okay, it is absolutely
but you're missing. I think you're missing context here, and I just want to make sure we have context, because context is very important as part of truth. And you're talking about all these hospitals.
It's incumbent upon you. If you want to talk about context, I'm all for it. But it's incumbent
Dimitri,
upon you.
I'm just going to ask you.
Please just finish my thought. You didn't interrupt, Matthew. It's incumbent upon you, when you talk about the context, to explain why year after year after year, the damage sustained by Palestinian infrastructure and the number of civilian casualties on the Palestinian side are vastly in excess of those on Israel's side. Every year since the founding of Israel, this has been true. So you want to talk about context? Please enlighten us. Why is that the case? And you're still telling us Israel isn't committing terrorism?
I want to throw this over to Matthew. Go ahead.
So a couple of things. Yeah. So no one's going to pull the wool over your eyes. You're seeing what you see, and you're seeing it from your viewpoint. There's always another viewpoint. So what you're seeing from 10 miles away or 8 miles away from Sderot overlooking the northern of Gaza, you're seeing things from 8 miles away. You're not seeing what happened on the inside. So let's go back. The infrastructure you talked about being targeted. In 2000, let's go where nobody really goes to. In 2005, when all Israelis moved out of or were forcibly removed from Gaza, billions and billions of dollars were put into Gaza for the infrastructure that they could have built. So instead of building up, they built down, right? That was a choice they made. That was the context that we have to put to this. Now, when you look at over the decades of the fighting between the two areas, between Israel and Gaza and Israel and Judea and Samaria, you're looking at even with Lebanon, why are there so many more casualties? Because when the Gazans built down, they weren't building safe rooms and escape rooms and bomb shelters for their citizens. Israel did. That was done very early because they had always been shot at, always been targeted. That's part of the thing with the context of what we have to look at. When you look at what you saw from a perch in Sderot, yeah, the devastation is massive. We're not denying that Gaza was leveled in certain areas. But at the same time, if you're building underneath, if you're building underground, miles and miles of tunnels, the only way to stop that terrorist attack from happening, because they're hiding in there. They're not hiding the millions of citizens of Gaza to go underneath there to protect them. They were hiding their militants. They're terrorists. What happens? They blow those tunnels up. If you hollow out the ground below you, those buildings will fall. It's a casualty that nobody wanted, but what else do you do? Add to that the amount of work they do to try to avoid civilian casualties.
So
that is
I just want
no other army. Sorry, Izzy. Israel. Nobody, other army turns around and says, "Hey, knock, knock, knock. We're coming to target this building. We're going to be here in 3 hours. Please move away from here so nobody gets hurt." I've seen the leaflets. They drop them down to make sure they can get them. They also give you a QR code as to where to go. No other army has done this in the history of warfare. And we have to focus on the fact that there are two sides to this.
All right,
would have been easier if Gaza had built upwards. They had amazing cities. Let's be honest, there is still a downtown to Gaza. Gaza has cities, right? I'm curious, Dimitri, were you ever in Gaza prior to 2023?
No, they've never permitted me in. I've tried numerous times to go to Gaza. In fact, I was on the Freedom Flotilla to Gaza. And by the way, the last time I tried to go into Israel, it actually wasn't Israel that I was trying to go into. I was trying to cross the King Hussein Bridge from Jordan into the occupied West Bank, which is not part of Israel under international law. Hate to tell you that, but that's crystal clear. As a matter of international law, the West Bank is occupied Palestinian territory, and Israeli officials prevented me from entering the country. And the reason they gave me was wherever I go, I criticize Israel. So for this, they stopped me from going. I would have to go to Gaza.
Is Israel
and
is it
see with my own
occupied
eyes the horrors that have
Palestinian
been
territory?
But I want to just
technically
I
would
want to
not
just
be
talk.
occupied Jordanian territory.
No.
I want to give you back. Sorry, Dimitri.
I want to respond. I want to respond because you talked about context.
I am. I'm going to let you respond.
And Matthew went to the tunnels issue. I'd like to speak to that.
Yeah. I'd like to let you to respond. Then I want to move on from this to some other stuff. But I want to let you respond. I want to let Dimitri respond to this. But I do want to say something, Dimitri. I have seen evidence with my own eyes of military infrastructure, bomb-making equipment, storage of. I think they call them their backpacks. They're called getaway bags or something like that. I have seen arms, bombs, and I've seen this evidence with my own eyes stored in hospitals and schools. And I think it's important that there's some, and I'm not taking a position except to say that I am seeking the truth as well. And so when we talk about the bombing of hospitals, we should also talk about what's inside those hospitals. And like Matt was saying, we should also give context to the fact that any time a bombing takes place, those hospitals have been warned. And one more thing I'm going to add to this is that often these hospitals have been bombed by Hamas. By Hamas accidentally, inaccurately dropping their own bombs on their own civilians.
Let's clarify that,
So
though. It's not just Hamas. You also
So hold on. Am I now
Islamic
going to be
Jihad
afforded an
with
opportunity to
multiple.
respond? Do I get a
Yes,
chance to respond to these
please,
things?
Dimitri, go ahead
First
and
of all,
respond.
I'm
Thank
getting
you.
the impression, this is fine if this is the way you want this debate to go. I'm getting the impression I'm debating both of you and not just Matthew. But hey,
No, I just want to make sure we have truth.
You definitely aren't
Okay.
being a neutral moderator until this point. That's fine.
I
That's
am
fine.
trying
happy
to. I'm
debate
trying,
both-
Dimitri. Yes, go
Okay.
ahead. I'm
Okay,
just
so
pointing out the truth.
tunnels.
I just want to keep the evidence.
First of all, the so-called evidence that Hamas is putting arms inside these hospitals, all the evidence, so-called evidence I've seen, is Israeli military personnel standing around some room in a hospital that has weapons in it. Who the hell knows how those weapons got there? You think it's not possible that the Israeli military planted them and then took a photograph? Of course it's possible. So that evidence doesn't amount to a hill of beans, number one. Number two, why would Hamas put weapons in hospitals or schools when it knows full well that Israel doesn't give a damn about the preservation of those hospitals and schools? It's now beyond a shadow of a doubt. You yourselves have just effectively admitted that if Israel thinks there are weapons inside a hospital or school, it'll attack it. So why would Hamas put the weapons there? Especially when you say they have all of these tunnels underground, why wouldn't they put them underground where they're much harder to be destroyed? This is just ridiculous logic. It makes absolutely no sense. And quite apart from all of that, under international law, hospitals have a specially protected status. Even if there are some weapons in there, Israel doesn't get to destroy the hospital. Sorry, there are limits on how much violence you can perpetrate in order to defend yourself. Now, I want to just speak to these tunnels. People talk a lot about the Israelis, these terror tunnels, this and these terror tunnels, that. What do you expect these Palestinian militants to do who are fighting this genocidal monster with light weapons? Basically with light weapons. Israel's destructive power is vastly greater than that of all the Palestinian resistance groups put together. What do you expect them to do? Do you expect them with no air defenses to speak of to actually mass out in an open field near, hey, come and wipe us out with a bunker buster bomb? They're doing what is necessary in order to resist. They are building tunnels underground because they have no air defense systems. Israel has bombing capability up the wazoo. It has Apache helicopters. It has F-35s. It has artillery systems, long range, short range, medium range. It has HIMARS systems. It has air defense systems. So what are they doing? They're doing what is militarily necessary in order to put up armed resistance. They built tunnels. They also built tunnels because Israel has imposed a suffocating blockade on the Gaza Strip, and those tunnels are used to bring in much needed material. A lot of it
is
for
it
humanitarian
sorry, it's not
purposes
qualified. Is it
Egypt.
just Israel that's blockading?
Well, Egypt is as well. You're right. The brutal Egyptian
let's make sure we
dictatorship,
involve two countries here, because
Washington-backed a brutal monster who rules Egypt in a way that favors Israel. Let's be very clear about that. He was imposed upon the Egyptian people who elected Mohamed Morsi. He was overthrown in a U.S.-backed coup. And now the guy in charge has absolutely no pity whatsoever for Palestinians. You're right about
I am really trying to stay neutral here, and I intend to. I want to give Matthew some opportunity to respond to everything you just said,
look at a lot
there's
of
a
this.
lot there.
So let's go to the hospitals. Gaza's not a very large area. And you probably know the number better than I do in terms of square footage or mileage. I do believe before October 7th, 2023, there were 32 hospitals in Gaza. Now, there are not 32 hospitals in New York City, in Manhattan, right? So a lot of those hospitals are designed and purpose-built for what many believe to be that cover. Now, when you say why would they just keep the rockets and the weapons underneath in the tunnels? They did. And they bring them up because you can't launch it from underground. So these weren't subterranean missile silos. They'd have to bring them up. They intentionally put them through into areas where there's more infrastructure. So to hide behind it, and as we call them, human shields, or just buildings or infrastructure shields. This is done with intent. Now, let's go back to 2005, 2006, when the Israelis removed every Israeli from Gaza. And let's remember, they even removed all the buried bodies. They removed everything from Gaza. Israel didn't turn around the next day and start shooting at them. They let them be. completely let them be. And the choice that was made when Hamas got elected, and has not had elections since that day, but they got elected, took over, kicked out Fatah and the rest of the PA that was in there, and they ran it the way they're running it now. They made a choice. Their charter was all about destroying Israel, ending Israel. So we have to, again, put context. They had the opportunity to do great things, and great things were not done because their charter, their belief system is that Israel does not get to exist.
Look, I want to move on here because we can sit here on this entire session and debate this. I'm going to get into some of the very critical things. I hope you guys don't mind. But again, what we're trying to prove over here and the whole idea of the conversation is truth. And truth being absolute. And Dimitri, you talk with absolute conviction of the truth that you see. Matt, you talk with absolute interpretation of the truth that you see, and I suppose we need to find where that truth is. I believe the truth is evidentiary based, and Dimitri, that footage from Israel, and I'm just staying neutral, but I want to speak. I want to make sure that we stay within the confines of the truth, and that evidence was verified by third parties. In fact, verified by the UN itself. There is no question about the fact that Hamas is using schools and hospitals as military depots. My question to both of you, and Matt, let's start with you, is what happened in Israel on October 7th, 2023?
What happened to Israel?
What happened to Israel or within Israel on October 7th, 2023?
They went about a peaceful Shabbat show, simple Torah morning. They were going about their daily life, and October 6th there was still that peace treaty that was in place, and the attack that came out on October 7th, where terrorists entered a sovereign country, sovereign territory, and brutally murdered, mutilated, attacked, killed by hand. So, we're not talking, missiles lobbed over, which they did do. Hundreds, I believe it was 1,000 that morning, randomly targeting the target wherever they can get as much devastation as possible. This was hand to hand. I've seen the video footage, the rapes, the murders, chasing teenagers down and shooting them point blank in the head, right? That started all of this. What we're dealing with now over the last 2.5 years, October 7th, was an act from Hamas, an act of war against Israel.
I really want to stick to what happened on October 7th itself. Dimitri, do you agree with Matt? Do you have a different version of events?
I don't agree at all. First of all, I'm not aware of any UN finding that Hamas was using hospitals to store weapons. If you want to share that with me, I'm happy to take it into account. But I'm not aware of anything of that nature. Secondly, why are you starting the conversation with October 7th? Why not start it, for example?
I want to clarify what happened. But Dimitri, I want to clarify what happened on October 7th.
Yeah, but please, I'm answering your question in the way that I see
just
fit.
want to
Please
know
don't
October.
You're not interrupting Matthew. You're interrupting me. Okay, just let
go
me
ahead.
answer the question.
Go ahead,
Now,
but please keep to October 7th.
No, but this is an important question. Why October 7th? Why are you? Because the reason why I'm asking this question is because it informs my answer to your question. Okay?
Well, listen,
you're asking me what happened on October 7th. You cannot understand what happened on October 7th without looking at the history of Israel's treatment of Palestinians.
I disagree.
So
I disagree,
okay,
Dimitri. And
are
it's
you
not
going to
a
let me
matter of
speak, or are you
debate
going to
over
constantly
here.
interrupt me?
No.
You did not interrupt Matthew. I did not interrupt
because he
Matthew.
answered the question.
Well, but that's your judgment. Okay, I'm answering the question the way I see fit. You don't get to dictate how I answer questions.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay,
go ahead then. What happened on October 7th?
You could have asked what happened in the summer of 2014. I'll tell you what happened.
But I didn't.
But no, you didn't, and that's the whole point. Israel murdered 550 Palestinian children. You want to tell me about the UN? That's the UN's conclusion. Okay,
Dimitri,
on October 7th. I'm trying to answer the question. I have a lot more to say.
Go ahead. What happened on October 7th?
According to the Israeli government, 39 children were killed by Palestinian militants. Not 550, 39. So why is this horrifying event constantly being talked about by supporters of Israel, where the far more deadly attacks by Israel on, and I just gave you one example. I could have talked to you about 2019. I could have talked to you about 2012. I could have talked to you about 2021. I could have talked to you about the Great March of Return in Gaza, where a friend of mine who's a doctor was shot by an Israeli sniper in both legs. Okay, I could have talked to you about all of that history, but you want to start on October 7th. Here's what happened on October 7th.
I don't want to start there. I just want to talk about October 7th.
What happened on October 7th is that Palestinian militants, some of whom were from Hamas and some of whom were from other resistance groups, crossed into the land to which they have a right to return under international law. Outside, they broke out of a concentration camp and attacked both military and civilian targets. I'm willing to accept that some people in those groups of militants did kill civilians. However, it is also crystal clear that Israeli forces killed some of those civilians in implementation of the Hannibal Directive. I don't know what numbers, and I don't know that we'll ever know, of those 800 or so Israeli civilians. That's what the Israeli government says. We'll just take it for granted that they were civilians. Fine. Okay, some number of them were actually killed by Israeli troops. There is no evidence, no credible evidence of any mass rapes. There's absolutely no evidence of children being beheaded. Haaretz, an Israeli newspaper, completely debunked that nonsensical claim. There were other atrocity porn claims made, for example, that a fetus was cut out of a pregnant woman's abdomen and another woman had her breast cut off. Lies, all lies, okay? There were some civilians killed, no question about it. But when you compare the number of civilians that, even if you say that all those civilians were killed by Palestinian militants, which is flagrantly false, some number of them were killed by Israeli troops. But let's say all of them. The civilian death toll on the Israeli side on that day is a tiny fraction of the civilian death toll in Gaza as a consequence of those attacks. Even the Israeli military has admitted recently that the death toll in Gaza, that the Gaza Health Ministry's death toll is more or less accurate, and it's not. It's a wild understatement.
Okay,
but let's say it's accurate. So the number
I don't think that any other day in history has been as well documented as October 7th in terms of we're talking about truth over here.
Look at the Israeli media. The Israeli media debunked these claims.
Not just Israeli media. Matt, go ahead.
Let's talk about Haaretz. I mean, let's put them aside because they are a far left newspaper that's filled with people who hate the country they live in. They're always going to debunk anything they possibly can, even if they lie, which they've been proven to lie. So when you look at the things you just said, the rapes have been proven. They've been done. Even the UN admitted that there was sexual violence on that day. You can't, if you're going to say, show me the UN report.
The report was bereft of any credible evidence. It was a pack of lies. Okay, that particular official who put that thing forward is a scam artist. It's a pack of lies because you're in the world of, if it comes from Israel, I'm not listening. It's a lie. There has to that comes back down to what is truth. No, you say that about Palestinians.
You can't just be one side saying this is what happened, because you just admitted even Israeli officials have debunked some of these things. So even Israel's willing to turn around and say we got this one wrong. This is what happened. Not on everything, but on some things. So that's part of the problem with this whole debate and this argument. Anybody who's pro-Israel is wrong, no matter what, off the bat. We're wrong. But anything that Hamas says is right. Anything that the Gaza
I never said that.
Which is Hamas.
I never said that.
Okay, so when you look at things like the numbers that the Hamas, the Gaza Health Ministry, which is Hamas, has said, okay, they're saying that 53,000, 54,000, I do believe the number is total people that have been killed since October 7th. That's the number the last number I remember hearing. Israel has said, and Hamas has agreed roughly, that about 25 to 30% of those were terrorists, were Hamas members or members of Islamic Jihad or PFLP, like of other terrorist organizations. Okay, could we go with those? Just forget what other people are saying. Those are the numbers that I've heard. Have you heard the same thing? 53.
Okay, so hold on. I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying that according to Israel,
according to Hamas's numbers, 53 to 54,000 people have died in Gaza.
What do you say, people? No. The Israeli military has admitted that the Gaza Health Ministry's numbers are more or less accurate, and their current estimate is about 73,000. So if you're saying I just want to be clear what you're saying. If you're saying that 25 to 30% of those people were, as you put it, Hamas terrorists, that leaves approximately 50,000 civilians. 50,000. Okay. The number of civilians, according to Israel, who were killed by, and as I said, many of those civilians were killed by the Israeli military, but let's forget that. It's about 800.
Oh, no, let's not forget that.
So you're telling me 50,000 to 800 and the Palestinians are terrorists and Israel isn't? Like, what drug are you smoking?
Gentlemen,
hold on, Matthew. Were Israeli casualties? Hold on, Israel. Were Israeli civilians and even some Israeli military killed by Israelis? Yeah. When Hamas and the other terrorists entered Israel, they weren't all dressed in fatigues. They were dressed like you and me are right now. And when you're in a battle and it's so horrific and you have no idea what's happening, you're running in there. And people who look just like you, because let's be honest, there are many Mizrahi Jews who are in Israel who look very similar to those living in Gaza. And you're looking at this and there is friendly fire. I'll get much like when Hamas launched rockets, Palestinian Jihad launched rockets into Israel and it hit a hospital. They killed their own people. That happened. They even admitted it. You're rolling your eyes. You've heard the same audio we've heard. But again, because Israel put it out there.
Who produced that audio? Israel? Some fabricated audio?
Dimitri.
So how is it that both of you, only Israel can fabricate?
I'm gonna referee over here. I'm gonna referee over here. I've been trying to talk about October 7th, and we started this conversation originally. We started this conversation analyzing truth and what truth is. Obviously, there's very different versions of truth over here, of your truth, and I'm looking, and you're a lawyer, Dimitri, so I look at documented truth, and you should appreciate that. And the fact is I find it very difficult to believe, to hear how you minimize the numbers and you minimize the type of hardware that has been used over here. And I'm not taking a side, although I'd be lying if I didn't have a side over here, because I'm looking at truth and I've got to call it what it is. And the fact is that what happened on October 7th is not only documented by international media sources, but documented by terrorists themselves who are webcams and who in conversations that they had with their family back in Gaza, and the fact that there were civilians. This is all facts. This is all truth of the thousands and thousands of militants that went over with quite sophisticated hardware. I am not bringing up propaganda over here. I am just dealing with truth, and I want to deal with truth over here.
You're not dealing with truth. You're dealing with little bits of information and ignoring the vast. You're the ones who wanted to talk about context. I'm trying to talk about context, and you guys, you keep trying to take the conversation away from the context. My point here, and I didn't deny. In fact, I explicitly acknowledged that some of those militants killed some civilians in Israel. Okay, I don't think we can say with confidence what the number is, but we can say with confidence that it's no more than 800, because that's what the Israeli government says with a civilian death toll on that day. Okay, so let's work with 800. Now let's compare it to the number of civilians that Israel has killed in Gaza since then, and in the West Bank. I'm not even talking about Lebanon or Iran, all the civilians they killed there. Just
we keep on territories.
So you're going to tell me that they are the terrorists, but that Israel gets to escape any charge of terrorism, even though Israel has killed, conservatively speaking, 50,000 civilians in Gaza alone since October 7th. It has leveled to the ground. It's not just one hospital. The entire hospital system has been destroyed. Universities have been destroyed.
Dimitri?
Mosques have been destroyed. I could go. They're killing journalists. They're killing doctors. They are raping detainees, and yet Israel is not a terrorist entity, but the Palestinians are.
Dimitri, can I ask you a question?
Please.
Okay. So
apply your standards equally to all belligerents. That's all I ask. If you're going to call these people terrorists, then you lose all credibility by saying that Israel's not engaged in terrorism. All credibility is gone.
That's untrue, because in war, And remember, they're a sovereign nation. They have an army. UK has an army. So let's go back in time. I want to get some understanding here. World War II. England went over. They leveled parts of Germany. England are terrorists? The British Army, the RAF were full of terrorists?
The British did commit acts of terrorism during the Second World War. Absolutely. Absolutely. And they should be held accountable for that. The Americans committed heinous acts of terrorism. The bombing, the nuking of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were amongst the most heinous terrorist acts in all of human history. And no one was held accountable for that. This is my principal complaint. Our terrorism gets a free pass. Their terrorism, the people who are oppressing and dispossessing, is the most evil thing that humanity has ever witnessed. But Western terrorism,
so let me ask you this.
Free pass.
So Israel's where it is. Lebanon's above it. Gaza to the west. Judea and Samaria on the west bank of the Jordan River. Lebanon, Hezbollah, a proxy, a front for Iran, is in the south. They're attacking Israel. What does Israel do? Take it?
You want me to answer that question?
Just sit back and say,
answer that question. If Israel complied with international law,
honestly,
but none of this would be happening. None of this would be happening. Israel wouldn't be getting attacked. Israel, not by Iran, not by Hezbollah. I'll just comply with international law. Stay within your borders, okay? Stop stealing the occupied Palestinian land. Observe humanitarian law as an occupier. And all of this violence will evaporate in no time. Israel is the source of the violence. And
you think
actually
Israel's existence is the source of the violence? I'm being a bit unfair.
It's actually Western governments who are the source of the violence, and Israel is their proxy. Israel is the rabid attack dog in this oil-rich region that is there to do one thing and one thing only, and that is to ensure Western hegemony over West Asia. That's what it's there to do. That's why they created it. So Israel is actually secondary to what is really going on here. What is really going on here is flagrant, brutal, genocidal Western imperialism through Israel. That's what's going on here. That's the cause of the problem.
Let's just, you know what? We're going down a rabbit hole here. We're going down a rabbit hole.
No, this is the central
rabbit hole.
This is the central point.
Okay. Well, it's not the central point. I want to bring this back here to Canada because it is widely believed that being anti-Israel is the same as being anti-Jewish. And my question to both of you is being anti-Israel synonymous with being an anti-Semite?
I'll let Dimitri take that one first.
Well, if you equate Israel with Judaism, which I don't, then it would be anti-Semitic. But if you understand or believe, as I do, that Judaism at its core is profoundly inimical to the core values of Israel and the practices of Israel, then there's nothing anti-Semitic about it whatsoever. The question that, if I believe both of you are Jewish, right? The question you need to ask yourselves, all members of the Jewish community should be asking themselves is, does this represent me? This so-called Jewish state, the mass murder of children, this represents Judaism? I would hope that you, as Jews of conscience, will have no hesitation in saying, no, that does not represent me and that does not represent Judaism. That's my position.
Okay, Matthew, does anti-Israel is it synonymous with being a anti-Jewish or an anti-Semite?
If you're saying anti-Israel as a government, being the anti-Israeli government, no, it's not anti-Semitism, because I'm not anti-Canadian because I don't like or believe in our liberal government, right? Dimitri, I don't think you believe in our liberal government right now and the people governing us. Does that make you anti-Canadian? No, right? If I'm against Israel as a whole for the right to exist as a Jewish state, for the people who live there, who do have their indigeneity from the land of Israel, and they target Israel Jews for what is happening in Israel, yeah, that's anti-Semitism. You're tying the two together because they are tied together. I always find it funny where people, argue that I have to either denounce Israel to be a good Jew, which is what you pretty much just did, a Jew of conscience. It's horrific that children and adults have died. So let's also talk about how the use of words, how we started this, how words have meaning. Not just children have died. But when we say it's just women and children, it's like the Titanic, women and children first, right? It sounds, all we see are the women and the children. It's human beings have died. Nobody should have to die. War is horrible. However, as it's been over millennia, war is inevitable. It's human nature, sadly. And it's fighting over a piece of land. It's fighting over my idea is better than your idea, right? Even a debate. You know, you and I, I'll be honest with you, Dimitri, we've been pretty good at this. We're not screaming at one another, calling each other names, which is what it should be. It should be more conversational. But even this is a bit of a war because we have different opinions and we're trying to get our opinion either louder or the one to change somebody else's mind. Listen, you and I are polar opposites. I'm not going to change your mind. You're not going to change mine. The idea is coming up to, like Israel said, the context behind this. This battle, this conflict has been going on for, I won't even say millennia. Let's just go back to about 130 years, right? This battle between Israel and the Arabs that were there, right?
Yeah, but I'm talking about Canada. But hold on, Matt, let's bring this down to Canada. You run an organization called Unapologetically Jewish. Obviously, you run that organization because you feel that Jews are under attack by way of anti-Israel sentiment. And so this is what I want to get to. Is being an anti-Israel advocate the same thing as being an anti-Jewish advocate?
I 100% believe in that regard, they are the same.
So you're saying that it's the same. And Dimitri, are you agreeing with that statement that being an anti-Israel advocate is the same as being an anti-Jewish advocate?
No, I emphatically disagree. And I frankly, I just flabbergasted that people would even ask this question. I mean, this is a state that is carrying out the most heinous crimes against humanity imaginable.
I know, but we're talking in Canada here.
Why would any Jewish person, whether in Canada or anywhere in the world, want that state to define Jewishness? It just amazes me. Of course it's not.
But here's the thing. But it's not anti-Jewish. But the pro-Palestinian movement does judge it. They've made a whole movement around the fact that look at the intersection of African Shepherd here in Toronto, where they're there
a while ago. Hold on, about the Hamas charter that are not true. Hamas revised its charter years ago. That doesn't call for, it doesn't say anything anti-Semitic in it. It doesn't call for the destruction
I think you got to read that. I think you got to reread that charter.
We get it. Whiteout's a thing, but the ideology behind it's still there. But let's go back to.
I would agree.
You watch.
I've interacted.
I really want to stay. I want to stay inside of Canada over here. I don't want to talk. Guys, hold on. I don't want to talk about what's happening outside of Canada right now.
No, I want to bring here, but let's talk about the whole Jews have to answer for what's happening in Israel. I'm not Israeli. I am Jewish. My homeland, my heritage, my culture, my lineage comes from Israel, from Judea and Samaria. I, though, today, being born in Canada, have to answer for what happens in another country. You and I aren't standing outside of a Russian Orthodox church with baseball bats and picket signs yelling at them for attacking Ukraine. We're not standing outside of Ukrainian Orthodox churches doing the exact same thing, who also, most Ukrainian Orthodox churches, have a Ukrainian flag, usually in the mosaic. So they're proud of where their heritage comes from. So if you look at Shepherd and Bathurst, which is an area that has become a light for conflict now between both sides of this conflict.
It's been an epicenter of protesting.
Right. So just a few months ago, back in March, there were individuals there with horrific anti-Semitic signage portraying Jews as demons, as beasts, caricatures with a big nose. And what does that have to do with what is happening with Israel and Gaza? They chose a caricature, a libel, literally straight out of 1940 Nazi Germany, right? What's that? What does that have to do with what's happening in Israel? They put the two together, right? And in order for you to accept what I have to say, I have to denounce denounce Israel.
You know, it was, I don't know what you're talking about. You know, I've been to many of these protests. I haven't seen this kind of thing. I've been to protests all around the country during the course of this heinous genocide. I've never seen anything like that. And I'll give you, please do. But even if you can find, you know, some odd protesters who are using signage that is arguably anti-Semitic, that doesn't mean that the whole movement or even most of the movement feels that way. Okay, you go into large protests, you can find all kinds of nasty characters. You can't filter out people who have offensive views from a huge public protest. That's the first thing. The second thing is some of the claims that have been made about these protests are absolutely laughable. So they had two, you know, there was one protest where they had Ben-Gvir and I believe Netanyahu being hung in effigy, which is, by the way, a very common, you know, protest technique to hang dolls in effigy. These guys are bloodthirsty war criminals, and the claim that was being made by the entire Canadian political elite right across the spectrum was that they were showing Jews being hung in effigy. No, they weren't Jews being hung in effigy. They were two bloodthirsty, psychopathic, racist war criminals who were being hung in effigy. And I have no hesitation in saying that both of them should be tried by a Nuremberg-style tribunal, and they should meet the same fate as the Nazis who were hung after they were convicted.
I really want to continue
this notion that they were stringing up, you know, Jews on this in this protest was a flagrant lie. That's not what they were doing at all.
Well, Matt, have you got evidence to this effect?
Yes,
Matt, have you got evidence to the demonization? Hold on one second, Matt. You've talked about calling out that protests are not necessarily about being anti-Israel, but these protests are in fact a normalization of the demonization of the Jew in Canada.
So let's talk. I want to address both things. I want to address both things. Let me start off with the effigies that you're talking about in Montreal. So the footage that we all saw was of two Jews. That's what the footage that was first seen. Two Jews being hung in effigy from the angles that they were on. Then it came out afterwards that they were Netanyahu and Ben-Gvir. Nobody had issue. People did have issue when they were hanging effigies of Netanyahu at the gates outside of McGill.
You actually believe that those protesters, in their own minds, when they put those things out there, that they had just in their own minds, they had just chosen two random Jews?
No. Dimitri, what I'm telling you is all the footage that was seen originally was seen that the angles it was on, you only saw people being hung in effigy. There were no faces that you could see from there of people wearing a kippah. That's what everybody saw. After the fact, after the whole chaos.
If you're explaining why they got it wrong, okay, fine, but they got it wrong. There's no question they got it wrong. It was Ben-Gvir and Netanyahu, both of whom should be tried by a Nuremberg-style tribunal, and if convicted, should meet the same fate as the Nazis.
I think we're talking about one isolated incident here.
Aspect on that, and we're gonna completely disagree on that aspect. But I will. Again, this is a proper debate, and we're going to have a conversation about truth. When it came out afterwards, I haven't seen any footage of the faces that they were showing of who they were. If you're doing an effigy of somebody, it should have a face. If you have that, send it to me. But I'm not disagreeing with you. The claim was afterwards that it was Gvir and Netanyahu. I will take you at face value on that they've gotten it wrong. Okay. Now, when we talk about what's happening at these protests, are there bad apples? 100%. But it seems to be there's a larger proportion of bad apples at a lot of these protests than there are good apples. And I'll give you a case example.
I've gone to dozens of them, and I've not seen one bad apple. Okay, I'm for purposes of argument, I'm willing to assume that at some of these protests there are. But I'm telling you myself, I've not seen one anti-Semitic statement or banner or effigy in the dozens and dozens of protests I've been through since October 7th in Canada. So I don't know what you're talking about when you say most of them are bad.
It doesn't always have to be an effigy or a sign. But it doesn't always have to be an effigy or a sign. It could be a statement being made. It could be yelling. It doesn't always have to be a statement or a sign or an effigy.
No, I understand.
It could be somebody saying something.
I agree.
What you're
but
going to
I'm
notice,
telling you that I haven't
when you're
heard
in
anything.
Montreal and you're at these. Right, now that I'll
Not
give
a
you examples to
single
why.
word.
When
I
you
have
go to
not
these
seen
protests,
or heard a single anti-Semitic word or banner
when you go to the protests, when you go to the protests, do you see a lineup of Jews? You'll see a few here and there. Yes, you will. But I'll guarantee you there are people shouting things at those Jews who are counter-protesting what you're there for. Last month, back in June, I went to the Walk for Israel. Okay. I'm walking by with my family and a whole bunch of protesters screaming my name, asking one very specific question. What kind of Jew are you? And I turned around and there was a Chabadnik there, a young man rapping tefillin. I said, let me rap tefillin. And as I'm standing there, being a Jew, rapping tefillin, which we're commanded to do every day outside of Shabbat and holidays, I'm being screamed at by multiple people, not just the bad apples. I know who the bad apples are. They're very well known. Other people that were with them, new bad apples, let's call them, but people that came to this protest solely to yell at Jews who screamed at me, Matthew Taub, you're not a real Jew. You're not a Jew at all. That's anti-Semitic. Sitting there as I'm standing there rapping a religious item and saying a prayer.
No, I don't
telling
agree.
me I'm not a Jew.
I don't agree. I don't agree. First of all, how do you know that the persons who asked that question weren't Jewish? Maybe some of them were Jewish. Maybe all of them were Jewish. But it's a perfectly fair question.
I know damn well who they are. I know who they are. I had on video.
If you were just,
I know they weren't.
If you were just some random Jewish person who was, praying in public or doing something which showed that you were Jewish, and you got asked that question, I would say, yeah, that may well be anti-Semitic. But when you're in a parade for a state that is carrying out a genocide in the name of the Jewish people, that's a perfectly fair question. What kind of Jew are you?
Dimitri,
you should be asking yourself that question. Another you really, you should sit back in your quiet of your own home and ask yourself that question.
There is a website out there. There is a website out there by the Maple called findidfsoldiers.net. This website is really up there for one reason only, and the purpose is to create lists. And it seems that it's a website hunting Jews. In our last episode, we had a guest who is also an anti-Israel advocate, or at least anti-what's going on. But he mentioned to us that his son, who's a minor, is inside of some footage, and he actually asked the Maple to remove that footage. They did not get back to him. Are you in support of this website? Do you think that this website is out of context, that is there for a very, is that website there for a specific reason to hunt Jews? What is your thoughts? What are both your thoughts?
This website is there to identify Canadian citizens who are participating in a genocide. What the hell does
hold
this
on,
have to do?
Dimitri.
So they've been tried?
Let me just finish, please.
Dimitri, but you've made an accusation that these people on that website are committing genocide.
They're serving in the IDF. They're serving in the IDF. They're serving in the Israeli military.
So you're sure that every person on that website has, you're making a claim, and this is a serious thing. You're a lawyer. You're making a claim. You're saying that these people,
they started yelling genocide before that conflict even started. Genocide is the word that's been trying to get out there in the vernacular for decades. Genocide. Let's be honest. If they wanted to commit a genocide, they could have flattened Gaza, and that would be the end of it.
They have flattened Gaza. They have flattened Gaza.
We're getting off the topic, Matt. We're getting off the topic.
They've completely destroyed Gaza. Can't you see it with your own eyes, man?
That includes all the people. If they wanted to commit a genocide would have happened. We know what genocide is.
First of all, according to medical experts, the actual death toll is likely in the range of 600,000 or 700,000.
Gentlemen, let's bring this right back to Canada. I'm talking about a website.
Okay, so I'd like to answer your question.
That I believe is immoral. I believe that website serves a different purpose than what it's meant to be. I believe that the activities of the Maple are nefarious. I believe they are featuring minors.
Apparently, I'm debating both of you today, which is
you're not debating me. Okay. You're not debating Dimitri. Please don't.
You're consistently taking the Israeli side.
I am not taking any side. I'm talking about a website.
Yes, you are.
Where minors are featured on a website hold on,
Are you
Dimitri, 'cause
are
I'm
you
sticking-
acknowledge? Let me ask you a question. Do you acknowledge that the people on that website either are or have served in the Israeli
Don't
military?
ask
during
me.
the
I'm
past 3
asking the
years?
questions. I can tell you that of course they're
I'll agree with you. Those
they're
people
lone
did serve in the
soldiers.
army.
So,
Yeah.
do
I'm
we
on the
agree?
website. Well, hold
Did you
on,
serve in the
Dimitri.
Israel?
I'm on the.
Did you
I
serve
did
in the
not
Israeli
serve.
military?
I did not serve in the IDF. I certainly wish I had. I did not serve in the IDF, unfortunately.
Well,
but I'm on the website.
okay,
Okay,
well,
I
look,
am on
my-
this
my
website.
underst-
Why am
my
I
underst-
on this website?
I don't know. You'd have to ask the organizers that. But my
I did ask the
understanding-
organization,
And what'd
and I
they-
asked
what'd they
them
say
to
to
take
you?
it down. They didn't say anything. And there are minors on this website, and the last time I looked, that is a violation, and that is a moral violation to put minors in harm's way. I'm just asking you if you think that this website should be taken down. I just want your opinion. Do you think it's
I'll
okay
give you my,
for
I'll
this
give you my
website
answer.
to
I'll give you my
exist?
answer. My understanding
Okay.
is that that website identifies Canadian citizens who have served or are serving in the Israeli military. If that's what the website is there to do, it is not only is it okay, I commend them. I applaud them for showing the identities of these people who are serving.
But
in
we're
Israeli
talking
military.
now. We're talking about anti-Jewish sentiment here. We're talking
hold
about
on,
No,
Israel,
anti-Semitism.
hold
we're
on,
talking
'cause I
about
wanna-
war
I wanna-
crimes and crimes against humanity, man. What are you talking
Right.
about?
Go ahead,
Israel,
Matt.
Israel, hold on a second. So, Dimitri, I understand what you're saying. You think they have the right if you serve in there. So let's make up lists for everybody who comes in from Gaza who was affiliated or served in Hamas, which is going to be next to near impossible to figure it out because they dress as civilians. But let's make that list, which I'm sure would be called APR and Islamophobia in 10 seconds. So that's the first problem. But let's look at this. There are two parts of that list, that website. There's find IDF soldiers and there's GTA to IDF. So the GTA to IDF is the same Maple put it out, the same people put it out. And the GTA to IDF kind of summarizes what's on that Find the IDF soldiers list. Now, it also includes, which also the original list pointed out what camps, summer camps they went to, what schools they went to, putting children at harm. Because let's be honest, a lone wolf, an insane person, a crazy person who is so indoctrinated with hate, that's what it will be, is given the opportunity to look at this going like, I've got to do something. I've got to go shoot up or vandalize, or we got to take out that school or that summer camp. That's part of what that problem is, that list. Now, let's update it to December when they put the GTA to IDF list out to there. And it just flat out listed the schools, a bunch of schools and a bunch of synagogues. Now, again,
Why?
What does a synagogue have to do?
Why were they on the list? You're leaving out critical information. Why were they put on that list?
Of course, because they're Zionists.
No,
they're
it's not simply
Zionists.
because they're Zionists. Their connections to
Hold
the
on,
Israeli
yeah,
military.
hold on. Every
and
synagogue
promoting
in the
service
world
of the
is
Israeli
a
military.
So
Hold
you
on.
It's really
think,
interesting to me.
by
You guys say you can destroy a mosque. You can literally flatten a mosque.
I never said you could destroy them.
Hold on.
But let me
Dimitri,
finish.
let's
Let me
stick to
finish.
Canada.
Let me finish.
We
Or
got to
hospitals.
stick
Hold
to
on,
Canada.
Dimitri,
Or
over here.
hospitals. No, but
hold on.
I'm coming back to
I know-
Canada. I'm coming back to Canada.
Hold
You're
on.
saying-
Hold on. I'm
you're
not
saying-
done speaking.
no,
Dimitri, hold on a second.
You did
Let me get back to the
defend
list for a second.
destruction of hospitals on the accusation that Hamas put weapons there, right? You did defend that, right? So you're telling me that that's okay. You can destroy a hospital because there are weapons in there. But here in Canada, it's outrageous that somebody just puts a certain synagogue on a list because that
But that's
synagogue
what
is
you
promoting
cut
service
me
in a
off.
genocidal military.
Hold on. You cut me off there a second. The two synagogues that were shot in Toronto, the Beth Ephraim Yosef in Toronto up in Thornhill and the Sher Shemaim down in Toronto, 14 kilometers between the two. If you go along Bathurst Street, there's 100 different synagogues straight up and down, where the storefronts or bigger buildings, bigger synagogues, okay? 14 kilometers apart, the Beth Ephraim Yosef and the Sher Shemaim. Both of those were the only two synagogues along that corridor that were on that list. They were shot at because they were on the GTA to IDF list. What? I don't care if they're Zionists, because these synagogues, we are from Judea and Samaria. That's where Jew comes from. So yes, we're Zionists. Now, I'll be honest with you. When I was younger, somebody asked me when I was about 10, 11 years old if I was a Zionist, and my answer to them was no, I'm Jewish. Why? Because they went hand in hand. And 91% of all Jews are Zionists, 3% are anti-Zionist, and 6% are undecided as to the last poll. So when you look at that list,
you've been looking at polls of the Jewish community in the United States. Where are you getting these numbers from? I mean, that's completely divorced from reality. There's a huge proportion of American Jews. Do you want me to get the poll right now? The most recent polling on this?
Yeah, as long as
we
it's
are
not
talking about.
Do not identify with Israel.
So let's talk about it, then we'll make it in Canada.
I want to stick to Canada here. I want to stick to what's going on here in Canada.
GTA to IDF list. That GTA to IDF list, which was an extension, a Reader's Digest version, actually, a more condensed version of the Find the IDF Soldiers list. You think that those synagogues are open season for shooting and targeting and burning and bombing?
Of course not.
Okay.
Of course not.
But those buildings were targeted solely. Again, if you want to target, let's be honest, there are hundreds of synagogues, whether they're storefronts or massive buildings within the GTA. They could have chosen any. Those two were chosen specifically, and they drove by a whole bunch along the way. They were targeted because they're on that list. That list is dangerous. Imagine would you be okay if a list came up of mosques and masjids that had members of Hamas on them or who were promoting anti-Israel sentiment that we made a list up and targeted them?
First of all, no, I'll answer your question straight up. Then no, because I don't agree with the terrorist designation. Okay, I don't think if you're going to call Hamas a terrorist organization, then it's outrageous that you don't call Israel and the United States terrorist entities. It's outrageous. So I'm all for applying these concepts.
You had your anti-Western
that's the reason. But let me go back to let me just put that aside for a second and answer your question directly. Let's assume that these mosques were in fact promoting the murder of civilians. Okay,
which there are.
I'd be all for them being identified publicly. Absolutely, if they were promoting the murder of civilians, any institution, it doesn't matter whether it's Muslim, Jewish, Christian, non-denominational, any institution that is promoting the murder of civilians and racism should be called out. Now, if some aggrieved citizen takes that information and misuses it to engage in an act of violence, then the criminal authorities should prosecute that person, which is what is being done here, presumably. That should not be permitted. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be calling out institutions that promote these hateful ideologies. They should be called out. Absolutely.
So because one or two kooks break the law, doesn't mean you should conceal what they're doing from the public. You should expose what they're doing to the public and make sure that everybody deals with that information in a lawful manner, which is what the cops are there to do. Okay, so let's talk about the kooks. There's more than just one or two kooks. Yes, let's talk. The shootings are the extreme, but let's talk about the massive increase of anti-Semitic attacks throughout Canada. And yes, there are attacks. There's anti-Islam attacks. We know that. I'm not denying that. I will never deny that. We also know, according to StatsCan, that reporting is there are 9 times less reporting than there are. So for every one attack, there's 9 according to StatsCan. 8 are not getting reported. Now, even with those numbers there is such a massive difference between anti-Semitic attacks and anti-Muslim attacks. Neither are good. Muslims should have their right to live freely in this country, just as Jews are. So we can't say there's just a couple of kooks. Yeah, the extremes went to the shootings. It's always the extremes. But we've normalized this hatred in Canada towards the Jew on such a level, and often, like I experience, being told I'm not a real Jew because I don't denounce Israel, right? But the increase of anti-Semitic attacks in this country are out of hand.
Sorry about that. Did you hear something in the background? My apologies. Some advertisement went off on my computer.
Could have been a protest.
I deleted it. Sorry.
Dimitri, listen, Matt, I feel like we're getting a little bit off topic here, but I got a question for both of you. If the anti-Israel sentiment is not meant to be anti-Jewish, why does every synagogue now have to employ police officers and security? I walk into my synagogue, Dimitri, I got to go through 2 security checks. There are police officers. There are at least 4 police cars in front of one of my synagogues that I'm a member of. Why is it? I don't see that at mosques. I don't see that anywhere else at churches. Why is it that if the anti-Israel sentiment is not, according as you say, anti-Jewish, why do we have to protect our Jewish institutions? Why is the Toronto and Montreal police forces tasked with doing that?
Well, I think it's a very good question, because as far as I know, the number of Muslims who have been murdered, just straight up murdered because they're Muslims in Canada over the past 5 to 10 years, is vastly greater than the number of Jewish persons who were murdered because they're Jews. Why aren't the cops giving at least as much protection to mosques? I think that's an excellent question. And I think the cops should come and explain that, because there's no evidence that Jews are subjected to more hatred, racial hatred, than Muslims are. There's zero.
There is.
What do you think?
No, it's B'nai B'rith's ridiculous definition of anti-Semitism. Anything that's remotely critical of Israel gets counted as an anti-Semitic attack.
I'm not going by B'nai B'rith. I'm going by the Toronto Police Services. Those are the numbers that I look at, because those are the ones who are actually getting the phone calls.
These are the same cops who go and train in Israel. Yeah, learn how to do policing in Israel. Yeah, please.
I've never heard about that. Dimitri, I've never really heard about that. Is the Toronto Police Force, is the Toronto Police Force training? I mean, we're talking about truth here. Is the Toronto, you've just made a claim, the Toronto Police Force, are they training in Israel? I've never heard of anything.
There are connections between Israeli polices and
what specific connections are there? And I've got to ask you this because you're using my platform to say something, and I think I need to know what the truth is. And I've never heard of anything with regards to Toronto Police Forces or members of the Toronto Police Force training in Israel. So I don't know. Matt, have you heard that? I haven't heard that.
Yeah, I honestly, there are, I don't know what they're training there, but have been delegations of police from Toronto who do with other groups as well. Now, with that being said, the Israeli army, the IDF, does actually work with Palestinians on training their policing as well. So they're just good at what they do when it comes, and I can send you that article as well, that information, Dimitri, about the Canadian, and even the Canadian military works with Palestinians on training.
We're really over here. I wanted to get into one more subject before we leave. Dimitri, you recently
can I just respond to the whole premise of your arguments here? Okay, which is that there's this huge problem with anti-Semitism.
I mean,
in Canada.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. I want to be fair here to you. Go ahead.
You know, if a group is actually being persecuted, this is going to show up in a whole range of socioeconomic indicators. They're going to be people, they're not going to be able to get, positions in elected office. They're not going to be able to serve in the judiciary. They're not going to be high income earners. They're going to have a lower standard of living relative to other groups in the country. And you can see this when you look at, for example, Black Canadians, and you can certainly see this with Indigenous Canadians. The socioeconomic evidence does not support the claim that Jews are persecuted in Canada. Certainly not at a systemic level. There are isolated instances of anti-Semitism, but this whole
notion... I don't understand. Hold on.
Jews are being persecuted in Canada.
If you look at the labor unions, if you look at what's happening in the medical institutions, if you look at ETFO, there are many, many. You may not agree with it, but it is there. And again, here's the question I have. If I were to
in my own profession, as a lawyer, there are all kinds of Jews who are pro-Israel occupying positions of power and influence on the bench, in Bay Street, all over the country, and they are not shy about making themselves known.
If I were to share with Dimitri Lascaris, if I were to share with you after we're done, if I were to share with you information and documentation of other areas, of other employment areas, of other job opportunities, other societies, other unions, would you read it and say, shit, he's right? If I provided you,
I'm happy to look at the evidence. Please provide it.
Like I'm happy to. I think it's one of the biggest things. Like if we're just sitting there screaming in an echo chamber in a void where, again, because I'm pro-Israel, you're not going to listen to me. What's the point of anybody ever having? Because nothing's ever going to be solved.
Fine, but I would ask you to also look at there's readily available data on the Covering the Canada website about the socioeconomic indicators in various ethnic groups, including the
100%.
Go look at that,
right,
and compare it to other peoples, including in particular Blacks and Indigenous peoples and Muslims, And then you come back and tell me that as a group, there's evidence as a group that there's systemic racism against Jews in this country. No, there are isolated instances of racism, but there's no evidence of systemic racism against Jews.
I am
Zero.
not sure what you're saying here.
Zero.
Dimitri, hold on,
Disagree
Matt.
with you.
Just
As a
hold on,
whole,
because
as a society, it is getting worse, but there are areas that we are completely being targeted, completely being forced out. Jews are hiding who they are. You may not see that as a big deal, but if I have to hide my culture, my religion, right?
I have to ask something.
That's a target. That is systemic racism.
I have to interrupt you because I have to ask you something, Dimitri, because am I correct in hearing that you're saying that Jewish people, because they are of a certain assumed socioeconomic place in life, that they are not persecuted as badly as others who are, that we, for some reason, and by the way, I come from very humble beginnings. I was not born into a silver teaspoon, so to speak, but I'm hearing something, and I'm hearing something that concerns me greatly. Who the hell cares what socioeconomic background a group comes from?
How about the poor people? Maybe you don't care, but what about the poor people who are being discriminated against?
Hold on a second, Dimitri. The fact is, if someone is being unjustly persecuted, does it matter how rich they are?
No, you're distorting my argument here. In any situation where an ethnic group is confronting systemic, I stress, systemic racism, not isolated individual acts of racism, but systemic racism, this will show up in the socioeconomic data very clearly. Clearly.
So
they will have a lower income, they will have a lower lifespan, they will live in poorer areas, they will have less access to positions of power and influence like elected office, the judiciary. It will show up. And that evidence doesn't exist in Canada.
Currently, in this moment that we're living in right now. But what we are seeing is the starts of it. We are seeing over the last 3 years, the slow push of Jews out of certain areas for jobs, for committees, for just
education,
social groups, education. It is
you actually believe that people in this country are being deprived of positions in education because they're Jewish, not because 100%. They're pro-Israel.
And I even know people. I even know, especially educators.
And so, well, fine. I need to see. Just because they say that I was deprived because I'm Jewish doesn't mean that that's necessitaly true. What evidence do they have? What evidence do they have that that's the reason for that?
I've got documents, especially in the education system through K through 12, documented evidence. Now, with that being said, if this is the start of the forest fire, let's call it, put it there, it's not going to show up right away. There's smoke. But 10 years down the road, will there be a socioeconomic change if Jews can't get jobs and can't find?
Well,
yes.
We'll have to see in 10 years' time. But let's cut to the chase here.
Hold on. It shouldn't be 10 years' time. It should be this. We need to work with everybody. Jews should not be singled out. Blacks should not be singled out. Indigenous should not be singled out. And let me say this, it's where you blow your mind. I think the biggest problem we have in this country is that our government purposely does not support the Indigenous community of Canada. They're using them left, right, and center for their own behalf. They need to actually work with it. One of the biggest things we need to do, let's find these people some fucking running water and help find their missing women and give them jobs and train them and give them what they need. We need to lift people up from their bootstraps and help them get where they need to be and not suppress them, which is what our government does. So yeah, I think we need to lift everybody up.
Let's talk about what's currently happening in the ground. So you say there's a surge in anti-Semitism. It hasn't showed up yet in the socioeconomic data, but it will. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
and we're trying to stop that. It shouldn't happen.
Let's assume that this is correct. What you're saying is correct. Okay. Why do you think that's happening now? Why do you think it's happening? Do you think it has nothing to do with the fact that a state that calls itself the Jewish state and that is described as the Jewish state by the Canadian government and by so-called mainstream Jewish institutions in this country, the fact that it's committing mass murder of children, you don't think that thing, the Jewish
hold
state
on.
doing
You know
this,
what? Hold on.
wait
There's
a
a difference
second.
between murder and death in war.
Israel,
Dimitri,
you're supposed to be a
Dimitri,
moderator. You're supposed to be
I
a
am being
moderator.
a moderator.
Israel.
No, you have not. You've not been a moderator for 1 second
So-
during this thing.
That's
You're
not
telling
true.
me, I'm
This
asking you a
is a
straight up
war.
question. Don't
I
interrupt me.
disagree.
And then I'll let you answer. You
Yeah.
actually believe that this is not causing some increase in hostility towards the Jewish people, the fact that this Jewish state is mass murdering Palestinian children? Really? You believe that has nothing to do with feelings about the
No.
Jewish people?
I think it has everything to do with it. And that goes back to the point that being anti-Israel is proving to be anti-Semitic. I have
No, it's anti-Semitic to say that Israel represents Jewish people. That's anti-Semitic. This monster represents Jewish people? I can't think of something more anti-Semitic than that.
The country of Israel represents Jewish people. The government, what's going to happen if a left-leaning government gets in there that I don't agree with? So am I all of a sudden I'm not going to be suddenly hold on.
You're talking about Yair Lapid, the genocidal maniac? Is that your idea of left-leaning? Give me a break. There's no left-leaning government in the Knesset that has any prospect of holding power. None. There's a little tiny party that nobody will deal with because it includes Arabs.
So,
But the
we keep
whole
on
of
taking-
Israel's
we keep
political
on-
spectrum. It's not just the current government.
Dimitri.
It's
Dimitri,
there's
I-
no
Naftali Bennett.
Arabs in-
It's
there's no
Yair
Arabs in
Lapid.
Knesset?
Okay,
It's Benny
gentlemen,
Gantz. They are all
gentlemen, we are already
criminals.
gentlemen.
So-
we are already 90 minutes into this.
Hold on, Israel.
It's a-
Hold on. I want to get back to this. If you are targeting Jews in Canada because of what a government does, that is anti-Semitic. You are targeting a Jew solely because of what a military and a government. Bibi Netanyahu represents the government of Israel. I support the state of Israel. I believe and know that we are indigenous to that land. We have been there for thousands of years. We weren't all kicked out. There's been a constant presence of Judaism and Jews in Judea and Samaria and in Israel proper. Okay. To target a Jew would be the same as when people started targeting Chinese when COVID came out. And everyone was up in arms because people were targeting Chinese for the Chinese flu, as Trump called it. And that became that was racist. How are you blaming the Chinese for what a lab in Wuhan did?
You're not answering my question. You're not answering my question. If you want me to agree with you that targeting, whatever you mean by that, a Jewish person just because of Israel's crimes and the fact Israel describes itself as a Jewish state, that's anti-Semitic, I have no problem with that proposition. The question that I pose to you is, don't you think there might be some connection between this increase in anti-Semitism and Israel's behavior? Don't you think there might be, just as a factual matter? It's obvious if there is, in fact, and there may be an increase in anti-Semitism.
The increase in anti-Semitism absolutely correlates to the war with Israel and Gaza.
Okay,
yes.
So maybe the best way to counter that, just as a factual matter, is to go out as a Jewish person and say, that state does not represent me or Jews. That is not a Jewish state. If it were me, if Greece, the Greek government, by the way, I condemn the Greek government relentlessly, okay, for its involvement in these various crimes. And I don't give it any slack whatsoever because I'm Greek and I'm a citizen of Greece. But if the Greek government were actually mass murdering the children of some group, I would be out there screaming every day that damn government doesn't represent
and
me.
Matt,
Dimitri
and Matt,
and that state doesn't represent.
Okay. We are 90 minutes into this. Dimitri, I have done my best to be a neutral moderator here or facilitator. What I have a problem with is I have a problem when I'm trying to talk about truth and seeking truth. I have a problem of insinuations that are quite the opposite of that. And I'm going to say something to you because I have to say this. I'm a Canadian. I happen to be a Jewish Canadian. You happen to be a Canadian too. You're a Greek Canadian. Matthew is a Jewish Canadian. There's many different types of Canadians. We have a multicultural society here. Part of being Canadian does not mean that you should be targeted because the assumption is that if you're Jewish, that you support or don't support Israel.
I think I just agreed. I think I just agreed with you.
No, but I hear you. But the fact is, no, because
why are you telling me this?
Generalized. I'm just going to say you have generalized something, and it's it.
No, I've done exactly the opposite.
I'm a Jew, and it hits close
You're
to
misrepresenting what came out of my mouth. You're telling me you're committed to truth, and you're just flat out lying about what I said. My whole point is that
I did.
Israel
I think what
is
you
not
said,
the Jewish people, and nobody should operate on that assumption. And it's anti-Semitic to say and believe that Israel is the Jewish people. That's
what I heard is that I said that you were saying that there is some credence to anti-Semitic acts against Jewish people.
No. I didn't say anything about credence.
They support
you're
the
misrepresenting
Jewish
what I
state.
said.
I don't know, Matthew.
I didn't say anything about credence. I didn't say anything about credence. I'm just talking about straight up reality here. There are people who will make the mistake. They will make the mistake of equating Israel with Judaism, and it's a mistake that should not be forgiven. And it should be called out. But
so you're saying
it is a fact that will happen.
So are you can you separate the state of Israel, the country of Israel, and the Jewish people who live in it, separate them from the government of Israel?
If they don't support the government, they oppose the government, I separate them, absolutely. And there are people like that in Israel.
So what's opposition to you? I oppose our liberal government. Does that mean I'm not Canadian?
Well, okay, sorry. Let me just answer the first part of your question, because I think the second half kind of muddles the water. I don't know.
I lost it on that. Yeah, okay, I got to
let me talk about what is going on inside Israel. Okay, there are polls, lots of polls, and they show that a large majority of the Israeli Jewish population supports what the government is doing to Palestinians, and all of the major rivals of Netanyahu, whether it's Gantz, Avigdor Lieberman, Naftali Bennett, they want policies that are at least as brutal as those being pursued by the Netanyahu regime against the Palestinian people. So it looks to me like the majority of Israeli Jewish people do support the genocide. Yeah, absolutely. Some of them don't, and I have nothing but admiration and respect for them, especially if they speak out.
What was
some of them do. But the people who support the child murder, no, I have nothing but condemnation for them, and I don't care what their religion is.
Guys,
I don't care what their religion is.
I can't go further. We're 90 minutes in. We could do this again. This has been great. It's been a lively conversation. Dimitri, I apologize if you feel I wasn't neutral. I really did try to be neutral as much as I could. I am trying to seek the truth. I am trying to come out. It's a little bit hard when I advocate for truth, and I'm hearing things that are sort of twisted truth. And I'm not saying that I'm not mentioning names over here, but I feel that we do that there is a lot of twisted truth. I think it's unfortunate because I think that people need truth in society. I think society is looking up to you, Dimitri. People are looking up to you, and they want truth. And I think you have a responsibility. You have a clear responsibility, as does Matt, as do I, as do anyone that's out there that is providing information to the public, is that we have a responsibility to provide truth and to set the record straight, so to speak. I got to wrap up here. I don't want to, but I really do have to. I want to give you both an opportunity, and let's keep it to about 30 seconds to 30, 60 seconds if we can. I want to give you each an opportunity to send a message to the world. If the world was listening right now, I'd like to give each an opportunity to send that message. I don't really know how to choose between you of who should go first. So I'll let you guys decide, but I need a message from both of you. Okay, I'm going to
go first. Happy to
Dimitri,
go first.
Go ahead. Give me a message that you want to leave with the world.
All of this, talk about anti-Semitism, Zionism, anti-Zionism is really concealing the fundamental problem here. The fundamental problem is that there is an economic elite, a wildly, obscenely wealthy economic elite in the West, the vast majority of whose members are not Jewish, and the vast majority of whose members, I suspect, couldn't care less about Israel. that are using Israel and other proxies in West Asia to carry out the most heinous crimes for one reason and one reason only, and that is because they covet the resources of that region. And that's what we need to be focused upon. That economic elite, call it the billionaire class, call it the oligarchy, what you will, again, the vast majority of whose members are not Jewish, are destroying the world and all that we hold dear. That's what we need to focus upon.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dimitri. Matthew Taub?
That was a complete switch from the whole conversation we just had, but I understand where he's coming from. My message is this, this conflict has consumed the world when it shouldn't have. And I think we're being distracted by looking this way and that way. I think what we really need to do is come together as a people, whether you're being a strong, proud atheist, a proud Muslim, or an unapologetically Jewish person. We need to get together and start having the conversations. We're allowed to disagree, but we have to be 100% right in who we are and confident in what we're saying and have the conversations no matter how difficult they are. The conversations have to happen or this goes nowhere. So I think we have to keep communicating, keep talking, and make sure that even if Dimitri thinks that the West needs to be stopped, we ought to have the conversation as to why, and maybe we can change each other's minds.
I think that both of you have said something very profound, and I think that this conversation is extremely important. And I think that the one thing is that I think we can all agree on is that there is no place for violence. We need to have discussion, no place for violence. Dimitri, in 1993, I ran for York Center for the NDP. Prior to that, I was a student of political science focusing on Middle East study. I made a party at graduation that had a cake, half a Palestinian flag, half an Israeli flag. I really believed that we could bring the two sides together peacefully, that we could all dance to the same tunes, and that we could have a good time together. It really is a tragedy what has happened in the world. And I wrote a book called The Wake Up Call, which is an observation, 7 observations I make to how October 7th happened, but also dealt with October 8th. And subsequently, in what I call a world gone mad. I know it. I'm an idealist. I know that I'm in lava land, but I do hope one day, especially here in Canada, where we are supposed to be respectful and socially responsible and treat each other with equality, if you will. I know these are ideals, but we should strive for them. I thank both of you for coming on today. Dimitri, I hope it's been a positive experience. Matthew, same as well with you. I hope I did right by both of you. And that I appreciate the fact that you're willing to come on here and to debate what is really the pursuit of the truth. I am Israel Ellis, and this is the Unfiltered View. Your comments are really important. All of us want to see it. I'm going to share your comments. I think they can be seen publicly anyways, but I'm going to share them regardless with Matthew and with Dimitri. I hope we'll have you both on again, do this again, and be more focused. I want to thank everyone for tuning in when you had the opportunity to tune out. Thank you very much.